Hello and welcome, teachers. My name is Ryan, and today I'm going to talk about some things that I never do with students. Let's get started. All right, so these are 3 things that I never do with iTalki students. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so that you'll be notified about more videos that I release on every Saturday and Sunday. Okay, so it's clear that usually I spend my time giving suggestions on what to do in the class, but I don't talk a lot about things that I do not do in the class. So I understand that all teachers have their own style, they have their own beliefs, they have their own values and philosophies. So today I'm not telling you exactly what you should or should not do, but I'm just explaining what I don't do and why I don't do these things by giving you real-world examples. Let's get started. Okay, number 1, the first thing that I do not do with my students, I never give an explanation of something that is incorrect by saying it sounds wrong, or it sounds strange, or it sounds weird. That is a no-no for me. I find that very lazy, and I find that most of the time this does not satisfy your students, and there are many other explanations you could give explaining why something would be better to use in English rather than just saying it sounds wrong or it sounds strange. Recently, I've been learning on Lingoda in addition to iTalki, and if you haven't already checked out that video, I give a review of Lingoda versus iTalki. This review is unsponsored, it is honest, and I talk about my experience on both platforms. In any case, recently I've been learning on Lingoda, and one of my teachers was explaining why you should not use a word because it sounds wrong or it sounds strange. This is no reflection on Lingoda, by the way. I've had teachers on iTalki give this explanation as well, and I'm going to explain why I never give this explanation and what you could say instead. For example, let's say somebody says my small brother instead of my little brother. Of course, my little brother, my little sister, those are more common collocations to use instead of my small brother. Now, there may not be a grammatical explanation or some sort of grammatical rule in this situation. This is a collocation. Okay, a collocation. This is what I would explain to my students. If there is not a grammatical explanation or some sort of rule, you could explain, look, in English there are a lot of outliers, there are many exceptions, all right? And sometimes this could be a little bit confusing and it could be a little bit frustrating, I totally get it. But when it comes to my small brother versus my little brother, we typically use little. That is more common, so that is the suggested form. What you could do after that is send your student a list of different collocations, like noun-verb collocations or noun-adjective collocations, so that they could study these collocations. So again, instead of saying it sounds strange, make sure that you're using the correct terminology and giving your student a more in-depth explanation of why this sounds strange. So there are other situations where there is some sort of grammatical rule that backs something up. So for example, if your student says, I'm going to Greece in Sunday instead of on Sunday. Well, if you say it sounds strange or it sounds wrong, that is not, there is a rule attached to this. Typically, we use on as a preposition before weekdays, okay? And rules, especially rules that are consistent, are hard to come by in this language that we call English. So make the most of it, explain the rule to them. And if you don't know the rule, well, this is your opportunity to look it up in class while you're speaking to your student. You could actually go on Google and try to find if there is a rule attached to this, right? Prepositions with days of the week, for example. And then you will be able to tell them if there's a rule or not. If there's not a rule and it's just kind of based on remembering different collocations, then you could tell them that. If it's an exception to a rule, you could tell them that. But if you just say it's strange or it sounds wrong or it sounds weird, that is not going to that's not going to help your student all that much. And when in doubt, if you do not have the required knowledge to be able to back things up with terminology and all of this jargon, don't worry about it. What you could say is, it's more common to say this than that, right? It is more common, and that's all you have to leave it at. Okay, the second thing I never do with my iTalki students is use grammar worksheets in class. Never, ever, ever. After more than 3,000 lessons on iTalki, I never use grammar worksheets in class. Your students are probably paying you for some sort of access to authentic language use. Otherwise, they may be paying you to help give explanations and to help instruct them, right? But if you are using free worksheets, which you could find online in your classes, for me, that is just wasting the students' money and wasting the students' time. Instead, what I would do is do research before class to make sure that I understand this grammatical concept. And then in the class, I will create exercises, maybe fill in the blank exercises, or maybe it could be correct or incorrect, like you could show them a sentence and ask them if it's correct or incorrect, right? And they could highlight the problem if there is a problem. Those are two examples of what you could do to teach and instruct grammar in class. Now, you need to have a good enough understanding of what the grammatical concept is, and that's not a luxury that is for all of us. So I completely understand that, and it may take you some time to learn these things. So I would be a little bit more understanding with this with new teachers rather than more experienced teachers. But for me, I would just go through the exercises in class with my student, and then after class for homework, I would give them the grammar worksheets. So let's take the on Sunday example. I will go to Greece on Sunday. I could easily go online and find a worksheet with prepositions of time, boom, and I could kill 20-30 minutes of class right there. But instead, I would rather expose my students to more authentic language. That is one of my values as a teacher. So here's what I would do instead. I would create a reading activity where I write down perhaps a few sentences, and they have to say which one is correct and which one is incorrect. So I will go to the market at Saturday. I will go to school in Monday. I will go to work on Thursday. And they have to explain which one is correct and why. Okay? You could even incorporate months and seasons in this as well if you want to. Aside from that, I can make this into a writing activity. I could ask them to explain their daily routine, in which case they would have to say, at 2 o'clock, I ba ba ba. At 6 o'clock, I ba ba ba. Explain your daily routine in 5 sentences, let's say. That's writing. In terms of listening, I could actually say a sentence and ask them, is this sentence correct or not? How could you correct it? Yeah, I'm going to say 2 sentences. One of them is correct, one of them is not. Which one is correct, which one isn't? Those are some, we're not reinventing the wheel here. Those are just a couple very simple activities, exercises that you could do by using your own voice and using your own fingers to type instead of just finding the first thing that you see online, which your student has access to outside of class anyway, and that's probably not why they're paying for the class. Now you may say, what if my student wants to do this? What if they ask to do it? Go ahead, knock yourself out, absolutely. I'm just saying that I don't do this. I don't use grammar worksheets with my students because I have taught 500 plus students on iTalki, and I have gotten feedback from them, and I have never heard a student say that they want to do worksheets in class. When I first started on iTalki, I used worksheets from time to time, and I did not get positive feedback from this either. But if you are getting positive feedback from your students and your students are asking you to do grammar worksheets, go ahead and knock yourself out. Number 3, I never correct my student after the first mistake. So the first time they make a mistake, I just put that into my mental cache. I remember it, maybe I'll write it down that they made that mistake, but I will not cut them off and correct them after the first mistake. If it is with a very common concept, so a very common construction. Let's imagine they say, I go every day to school. It's more common to say, I go to school every day, right? So that is a common enough construction that I'm not going to cut them off right there. Instead, I would probably ask them some other questions later, which somehow elicits this use of language. So I would ask them, how often do you go to fast food restaurants? How often do you travel outside of your home country, right? So that way I could hear, is this mistake that they commonly use, which is the placement of adverbs? Is this a common mistake that they're using over and over again with different adverbs? Or is it just a one-off and maybe they had a mental slip and they just kind of like threw a bunch of words together and they put always in the wrong place in the sentence? I go always to school. We don't know after the first one, right? So if you're correcting the first error every single time, you're going to be a busy person and you're going to be cutting off your student a lot. If that's your style and that's what you like to do, that's cool. For me, I look for patterns, and I always consider how frequent a construction is. So for example, if I hear a mistake with a construction that is not so common, I will actually tell my student most likely, or I'll just write it down in the Google Doc so they remember for after. The reason why I do this with less common constructions is because there may not be another opportunity in the class where they will naturally, organically say this. So I want to kind of nip it in the bud right away and to fix this issue before it becomes bigger. However, if it's a more common construction, I'll probably just let it slide and listen more, analyze my student for more mistakes that they make. And if they make more mistakes that fall into this category, then I will let them know, I'll cut them off and I'll give them some feedback. But basically, in a nutshell, there's no way of me knowing that this is a common mistake until I speak with my student more and I hear these mistakes being made more often. Now, my philosophy here is starkly different from a lot of other teachers' philosophies who say you should correct every single mistake to avoid fossilization. That means to prevent the mistake from becoming embedded in the student's linguistic repertoire, right? Like the way they're speaking. And I completely understand that as well. However, for me, I try not to cut my student off in the conversation, and I'd rather just put this as written feedback. And then after I hear a few more mistakes that fall into this category, I'll just kind of put them all into one package and just say, okay, from what I hear, you may need to work on prepositions. You may need to work on adverb placement. Okay, teachers, those are 3 things that I never do with my iTalki students. What are yours? Let me know. Tell me what you think about my values as a teacher, and if your values are different, I totally respect that. As always, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and consider hitting the like button as well. If you're looking for any cheap or free materials, consider becoming a patron for as little as $1 a month. It really helps out the channel. And until next time, keep smiling.